Well, thanks for coming and being part of what we're doing here at One Church today. Today we are kicking off a series called Beyond the Walls. Any competitive people here today? Now, I'm a competitive person, to some degree. I find, I'm a competitive person, so maybe I'm a bad person to say this to, but exactly, right? Go for it, man. That competitive people kind of feel like everybody's competitive to some degree, to some degree, maybe lesser degree than you, but people want to win or whatever. Any competitive person married to a competitive person? Is it bad when your wife is the one that shouts out the loudest? Like, yes! Yes. It can be challenging at times, right? It can be, it can lead to some epic fights. Nobody kind of wants to relent or admit that they were wrong. I can remember times where Jen and I would be playing games and, we were kind of really competitive. In fact, one game that I know it probably seems superficial, but one game we're kind of competitive at is Monopoly. And here's what I'm saying is, you're competitive when you're playing Monopoly 1 versus 1. First of all, find something, probably should find something better to do, right, at that point in time. But you won't trade with one another, right? You won't trade with one another because you feel like you're getting the raw end of the deal every single time. It happens to me all the time, and I just don't understand it. But it's because I'm a competitive person. I want to win, but I also married a competitive person who doesn't want to relent at all and doesn't want to, of course, let me win at all. So, and I don't want that. As a competitive person, you don't want people to let you win. But you can be competitive in a lot of different things. You can be competitive, obviously, in sports or in business. In games like Monopoly or Euchre or whatever. It's kind of just we kind of come to the point, and sometimes we come to the point where we embarrass ourselves, right? When we are playing games with maybe other people who aren't as competitive, to the point where and I've been there. I've been there sometimes where I'd been advised, Jason, we're going to be with other people. Please restrain yourself from being so competitive. It's like we don't need to bring this up because we don't want to embarrass ourselves in front of other people where you don't want to play games in public anymore, right? It kind of gets to that point. And so we all have things in us that at times taint the way that we do things. The way that we look at things, and it enters into everything in our lives. We're highly driven. That's one thing about competitive people. I'm highly driven. I want to be successful, but that motivation can be, as the driving force, may not be extremely healthy. It might be unhealthy fuel. It could be brokenness. It could be a fear of embarrassment, or a fear of failure, or a fear of abandonment, or can be masked by some things that others treat as great successes, or they acknowledge as great successes. That you did a great job in this, and that drive may be an unhealthy force, that unhealthy drive, unhealthy fuel that drives us to do it more and more and more and more, because we don't want to either let other people down, or we don't want to be embarrassed, or we want to kind of maintain the status quo. And in David, King David said something. He said, "Lord, test me, try me, see if there's anything in me that's not of you. Kind of take that out, clean me, purify me, because there's things in us that kind of hinder what we present, and what that taint how we look at things and how we do things. And so, in fact, you can start doing something for one reason and end up doing it for a completely different reason." Right? You can end up like, I want to do this thing because I really feel like I want to make God known. I want to honor God in this endeavor, and it ends up being that we started there, but kind of the competitive nature took over, and like, well, I want to win. And we can start by doing something for one reason, but our nature can take over, and it can become about us and not about the reason that we were doing that thing. And that's dangerous. That's something that kind of we want to talk about. And each of us is different, but all of us are called to use whatever we have, whatever resources or energy or talents or passions to glorify God. And so this morning, I really want to talk to the people who are part of the church and who are followers of Christ about the purpose of the church and how we want to get beyond the walls, want to get beyond ourselves today. So if today you're here and you are, you're like, man, I just don't know if I get this God thing. I don't know if I get this faith thing. That's all right. I just invite you to investigate what's happening here today. You're going to get a great glimpse at the purpose and passion and power of the church today. And it's awesome. We are so thankful for you to be here. But, so a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is directly applied to those of us who, say, man, I'm part of this church. I'm a follower of Christ. And so just kind of take it through that lens. See, the purpose of the church, sometimes we can overcomplicate the purpose of the church, but really what the purpose of the church is all about is it's about mending and casting. Mending and casting. Mending and casting. Jesus walked right past the synagogue. He walked right past kind of the elite of society. He walked right past the high thinkers. He knew what the mission of God was. He knew what the church was going to look like and how it was going to act and how it was needed to be treated. He walked right past these educated, high-minded people who you would think could understand it and comprehend it and be able to execute it. And he walked right to this smelly fishing dock. And he was like, you know what? I feel like these are guys that get it. These are guys that get it. And, because he walked up to him and said, see what you're doing with that net? See what you're doing with how you're kind of putting together that net? In fact, he walked up to these fishermen one time, and it says the scripture says that they were mending their net. They're putting their net back together because you catch some fish and the fish start tearing at the net, and so you have to mend the net back together so you can go back and catch more fish. Right? And so they were tending to their net, they were mending their net, and it says Jesus these guys get it. See what you're doing with that net, how you're fixing it and repairing it, and you're spending time. I want you to do that, but we're going to do that for people. We're going to do that for people. When it's broken and it's ripped, you spend time mending and repairing it. But then when it's fixed, you cast it out and you get more fish. And that's what the church is all about. We want to be mending and casting. And so, in fact, Jesus said, all who are weary, all who are heavy laden, all come and find rest for your souls. It's like the purpose of the church, the purpose of having this time together is to be mended. And a lot of us, we come to church and we need to be repaired. We need to be mended a little bit. We've been broken a little bit. Maybe we've had some hurt and some pain, and we just need a time of mending. But then there's also this time of casting. Like let's go out now that we're mended. Now that we're kind of fixed and repaired and we're ready to go. Now we have a job to do. We have to go cast. So the purpose of the church is in mending and casting. And once we've been healed and fixed, we don't get lazy. We have to, now it's our job to use every resource and leverage every opportunity to the glory of God to reach new people that need to be mended, that need to find hope in Christ. And so the power of the church is not in its seating capacity, but in its sending capacity. This is kind of the power of who we are as a church is not necessarily how many seats we can fill, but how many people we can reach. It's about sending. It's about seeing about taking what we've learned and what we've experienced. How well have we taken what we've learned here and what we've experienced here? In fact, if you've ever experienced God here, and maybe God has said something to you or revealed something to you, or there's been some a transformation in your heart, you shouldn't be quiet about that. It shouldn't stay here. And in fact, it needs to go viral in your world. It needs to be something that you talk about often. It needs to be something that you share quite. If God has done something in your life, if something here has happened in your life for the better, you need to let people know about that. Like we don't do that in anything else, right? If we got a hot tip on something, if you hear of a big sale somewhere, right? You let people know about it. Hey, I just got this, off at this store, whatever. This is awesome, and people are like, man, I gotta go check that out. Oh, hey, man, Netflix is only $8 a month. Man, I can get all my TV for $8 a month. Let's do it. Let's do it. I mean, we share that kind of stuff. What even more so when God does some things in our lives. And so where I want to take us today is a passage in 2 Corinthians, and 2 Corinthians is a book that was it's a letter really written by the Apostle Paul, and basically what this is have you ever had somebody who you're texting with, and they send you like the longest text message reply, and you're like, I really don't know if this is a text message or it probably should be at least an email. This is so long. I don't know why or that text message. Maybe you've had this. Certain phones do this, right? Where breaks the text message up into like 20 different texts. You're like, man, this person had a lot to say. This is basically Paul doing this. This is a response to something he's heard and something that he's heard about that's happened in this startup. See, Paul was a very kingdom-minded man. In fact, many of you know that Paul was persecuting Christians before he became one. He was actually killing Christians before he became one. And, once he became one, this transformation just kind of had a complete 180 in his life, that not only did he he tell the world about it and it went viral in his world, but he actually had to, before that could even happen, he had to like make amends with the people that he was been persecuting, right? And so this was passionate to him. This was important to him. And so he would go around the Mediterranean rim, and he would create startups. And he would start churches and little kingdom works, and he would do it in all these different towns and cities. And one of the cities that he did it in was Corinth. And Corinth was this epicenter of Roman culture and Greek culture, and it was just this everybody kind of came in. And it was just kind of this big melting pot of culture and kind of just city life. And so Paul, one of the startups that Paul did was in this city. And every once in a while, he would like kind of check in and see how things were going, and word would get back to him. And he would kind of start something up and kind of get it going and get it on its feet and make sure it's set up right and good. And then he would kind of move on to the next city and do it again. And he would leave it in capable hands. Well, in this instance, kind of word got back to him about something that just really kind of made him nervous and concerned. And this letter to the Corinthians, this is a second letter to the Corinthians. It's a response. It's basically his text message response back to the things that were happening in this startup, in this church plant. And the thing that you can know about Paul is that you couldn't really knock him out. Like, you could knock him down. In fact, he really goes on in this letter to talk about all the times that he'd been beaten and he had been flogged and he had been shipwrecked and he'd been almost put to death and all these type of different ways. Like, you could knock him down, but you could knock him out. He just kind of kept coming. And Paul needed to speak on this. And he found out that there was a group named the Sophists who were spreading just kind of information around. And they were misleading the people, misleading the church. And what you need to know about the Sophists were that these people were wise, they were intelligent, they were philosophers of their time, they were very good orators, they had eloquent speech, they came and they were very thought-provoking and very engaging and very inspiring and very impressive. And people would be misled by them a lot because of just how they would present. They were very engaging, very motivating. And so and it was their business. This was their business. They would kind of travel around and they would do these public forums and they would speak in public and people would kind of gather around, and the elite in the community would want them to teach their children. So they'd kind of be there for a little bit of time, and the elite in the community would be like, hey, teach our children how to think and how to the ways that you've learned and all these different things. And we want them to kind of be like you. So they would go around from community to community, and they would just impress people. And they were a very high level of society, and these guys rolled into Corinth, this epicenter of culture, and they would undermine the gospel, and they would undermine what Paul was teaching and what and put into what he put into place, and they would undermine them with kind of this pop culture theology and philosophy. And then people who were beginning to follow Jesus were becoming overly impressed with these people. So then the Corinthian church began to show its disunity. The Corinthian church was not very unified at all. And this instance actually amplified and kind of put a spotlight on the disunity that was there, and it kind of just drove a wedge in it. And there was just division. And so Paul is obviously upset about this and concerned about this, like this work that he had put all this energy and his livelihood into, and all of a sudden it's becoming kind of just ripped apart by these people who were just, impressing people with how they presented things and kind of their intelligence. And, sometimes we follow personalities. And that's really what was happening in this instance. And so, Paul was really kind of concerned about this, and we see Paul's response, and Paul kind of went on a little bit, and he likes to write and run on sentences because basically he was that kind of emotionally invested and involved. Like I'm upset, I'm trying to reel it in, but I need to let you know what is up with what's going on. And so he wrote this in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 7. He says, "We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God and not from ourselves." This makes it clear that this treasure that we have is from God and not from ourselves. In fact, what he's saying is, all we are these clay jars. That's all really we are. But inside of us, we carry something very valuable. It's a great treasure. But if we get the understanding that this is all we are, we're only the kind of this clay jar, that we're very fragile. If we get that, we understand that it's not from ourselves, but it's from God. It's from God. See, the sophists would directly attack Paul, who wasn't there to defend himself. And we've probably been in this position. You've probably been in this position where somebody's attacked you or said something about you and you weren't there to defend yourself, right? It makes us upset. It gets us angry. And Paul was no exception here. So Paul finds out that someone's talking trash about him. And Paul's like, I got to address this. And he's doing his best in writing to defend himself and without getting really too defensive. And you can kind of see his emotion as we kind of continue through this chapter. And through this letter, because he's ticked that because he feels like the people are being misled. And this community was smart. Corinth was smart. It was educated. Very cultured. But when it came to spiritual maturity, they were very much lacking. And because of that, they were easily able to be manipulated. And the similar dynamic is kind of in our world today. We can be cultured, we can be educated, we can kind of be thinking for ourselves, we can be smart, but when it comes to spiritual maturity, maybe we're not all the way there yet. Maybe we're lacking a lot, and it makes us susceptible to be easily manipulated by pop culture theology and philosophy. And so what Paul is saying to the Corinthian church was, very much applies to who we are today. In fact, there's a recent study out by the Barna Group that says that 46% of Americans read the Bible more than a couple times a year. Seems like an odd question to ask. Do you read the Bible more than a couple times a year? Like 2 or 3 times a year? Sure. 46% of Americans said they read the Bible more than a couple times a year. 26% said they never read the Bible. They never read the Bible at all. So we kind of see this kind of idea that biblical literacy is not necessarily our forte as Americans. And so, what we think about is, what are we motivated? I talked about unhealthy fuel and how we are motivated before. Are we motivated by God, or are we driven by something else? Do you find, and this is don't raise your hand at this because you need to out yourself here, but do you find that success brings you closer to God, or does success kind of drive you away from God? What I mean by that is, like, something goes well. Obviously, when we are in like very dire situations and we're in deep need of something, like, we come to God a lot. Like, God, man, I just need you to get me out of this. If you do this, I'll follow you. Or I have nowhere else to go. I have nowhere else to turn. And God, I need you. And then kind of you get pulled out of that, and you're like, oh, thank God, thank God, thank God. But like, if you are really successful, does that bring you closer to God, or does that really kind of drive you away from God, meaning that you're like, okay, I got this now? I feel good where I'm at. God has blessed me, but I can take it from here. I feel good. Does success bring you closer, or does it push you away from God? And so what Paul is saying is, don't become overly impressed with other people's giftings or their business acumen or their ability to crunch numbers, the way that people speak. Because all of us are just fragile jars of clay. And the only thing that makes you special is what's in you. You see, it's not about you. It's about what's in you. It's not about you. It's about what's in you. And in our world, when something like a clay jar breaks, we tend to throw it away, right? In fact, I was asking Jen today, do we have a clay jar around the house? Because I don't know, right? And so she's like, yeah, we had a clay plate, and then I found this, and I was like, oh, and she goes, don't drop it. Right? Because we know if we drop this thing, it's going to crack and just all kind of crumble, maybe just completely break apart. It's fragile, right? If I drop this right now, I would get the stink eye from my wife, but I'd also be like, this could actually help my illustration out a little bit more. Because that's all we are. We're fragile jars of clay. This is it. That's who we are. But inside of us, we carry this great, great treasure. In our culture, when something breaks, we kind of just throw it away because it's broken, it's useless. And we don't need it anymore. And in the kingdom of God, it's actually completely different. And when it comes to God, it's not that way at all. It's like when you're broken, it's not that you're useless or worthless. It's complete. In fact, it's the polar opposite. And Paul is saying that these sophists are coming in and totally messing with your heads. Totally messing with your minds. And you want to hang with them and be connected with them, but that's not the way to think because it's not about you. It's about what's in you. And it's easy for us to crack and to chip in our humanity. The pressures of life or whatever. It's easy to just crack and we all fall apart. We're just clay. But the significant thing is not you, it's what's in you. In fact, one of the arguments that the sophists would make about Paul was recorded in Paul's response. In fact, in chapter 10, he says it this way. He says, these are the sophists saying, for some say, Paul's letters are demanding and forceful, but in person he is weak and his speeches are worthless. Basically what Paul's saying, look what they're saying. They're saying that Paul can write good, but he's not much of a speaker. In fact, scholars would say that when they said that he is weak, it really meant that he wasn't much to look at. Not only was he not attractive, but he couldn't speak very well. So you shouldn't really take him at what he's trying to say. You shouldn't really follow us because we got the personality. We can speak well. That's what the sophists would say. So Paul kind of illustrates this out, and how would you not be upset about that, right? Like if somebody said that about you, you'd be like, whoa, hold on a minute, man. And so, he's just a good writer. He's not much to look at. And Jesus talks about this, right? He says when those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And so, when we talk about going beyond the walls, it's important to ask, how do you view yourself? Probably all over the map. Probably in this room, all over the map. Probably all over the map, from outright kind of arrogance to complete insecurity. From God is lucky I got out of bed today. Like I heard my alarm and I made it. So he should be thankful that I came to church. Like, I'm kind of a big deal. People know me type of thing. To me, no, I got like skeletons in my closet. I got issues. I got a temper. I'm prone to failure. Big time. I'm divorced. I failed last week. I was abused or misused or hurt. I'm broken. We're probably all over the spectrum from complete arrogance to complete insecurity. That's probably how we view ourselves in this room. And what Paul is actually saying is, whether you have the corner office or whether you view yourself as worthless, all you are is a jar of clay. That's all you are. Fragile jars, easily nicked, easily cracked, easily bent. But it's not about us. It's not about what you are. It's about what's inside of you. You know what? Unlikely people are often the most likely to be used by God. Unlikely people are often the most likely people to be used by God. Some of you have crossed your name off the list of being used by God a long time ago. Maybe it's been recent. But you cross your name out because you think, I'll never be a church person. Maybe you're not even sure what you believe, and you're like, I haven't even, solidified my beliefs yet, so I can't be used by God. I'm not even totally sure about myself. Well, guess what? It's perfect. I'm not a religious person. Perfect. You know, another group that is used by God often, undeserving people. Not only unlikely people, but undeserving people. People, checkered past, failures galore. You know, you're a perfect candidate. You're qualified. Unlikely, great. Undeserving, great. Fact is, if you're unlikely and you kind of view yourself in this manner, you're probably already humble to a certain degree, right? You're a wonderful candidate. You just have to reframe the whole conversation. You have to rethink what you've already been thinking. You know, God's grace shows up right on time when you least deserve it and you least expect it. And it's not enough for us just to come to church. You know, Jesus didn't die for you to come so that you could come. You can kind of sit on these nice comfy couches on Sunday mornings and hear something good. You know, our mission is to be mended, to be repaired, to be healed, to be restored, and then to cast. To help mend others and help cast them. So after Paul kind of goes off on this, it's not, we know that it's not of ourselves, but it's from God. We have these treasure in jars of clay. He goes on to say this in verse 13, but we continue to preach because we have the same kind of faith the psalmist had when he said, I believed in God, so I spoke. We have the same kind of faith that the psalmist had, and I believed in God, so I spoke. So we continue to preach, and so we preach in a lot of different ways. And most people just kind of think that what I'm doing right now is preaching, and you're right. But preaching can be anywhere at any time. In fact, preaching is just proclaiming in any setting. In the car, over the phone, over a meal, in a text message, wherever, proclaiming the good news of Jesus. So we preach. We continue to preach, all of us. We continue to preach because we have the same kind of faith the psalmist had when he said, because I believed, so I believed in God, so I spoke. If you believe in God, don't let your belief and don't let what God is doing in your life kind of stay with you. You can't stay quiet about that. It needs to go out. It needs to go viral in your world. Not in an irritating, annoying way. In a loving and a gentle way, but in a way that you can't, like God has done something so in you, you believe so much that you can't keep quiet about it any longer. We're fragile, but we carry something incredible. And he kind of goes on to say, we know that God, who raised the Lord Jesus from the dead, will also raise us with Jesus and present us to himself together with you. And this is great, this next line. All of this is for your benefit. As God's grace reaches more and more people, there will be a great thanksgiving and God will receive more and more glory. All of this is for your benefit. All of it. And God's grace reaches more and more people. That's what we want to see. That God's grace can reach more and more people. It's not to make a name for ourselves. It's not to make us great or anything like that. It's so that God's grace will reach more and more people. And for some of us, this thing kind of prohibits us from proclaiming the good news, from inviting someone to church, from taking that social risk, from sharing our story, from sharing the gospel, is how, it inhibits us because we're not sure how we're going to be perceived through that. And some of you have hurts and you have pain and things that you're embarrassed about and things that you don't really want anyone to know. Things that you kind of come through, things that are nicks and chips and cracks. And you worry that if you share about the goodness of God, that you may be looked at as maybe you'd be looked at as superstitious. That you might lose credibility in the marketplace, in your job, that you might be marginalized because of your beliefs, that you may be misunderstood. You may think, I will lose many of the benefits or all of the benefits that I've had, that I've worked so hard to get to where I am today. And if I do this, I will lose it all. And Paul is saying, you're thinking the wrong way. You're thinking the wrong way. Actually, when you do this and you realize it's about what you carry, not about you, but what you carry, because I believe, now I speak, all of this is for your benefit. Whatever risk you take, the benefit far outweighs the risk. And some of you have experienced the joy and the pleasure of success, but there's nothing in the world that can compare to the fulfillment of watching God use you in your cracked, broken, chipped state to glorify Himself. Then you become humbly aware of your lack of capacity, and you are in awe of what God does. You're kind of like, man, he used that? What? Are you kidding? And you realize you're just a jar of clay. And it's about what you carry. You carry an amazing treasure. And what's the best way to do this? The best way, to kind of get the word out, like what God is doing is, Facebook ads and marketing campaigns and, billboards and commercials and whatnot. Or is the best way to do this everybody waking up to the fact that we're just clay. And everybody waking up to the fact that we have this treasure that we carry. And everybody saying and praying, God, where can you use me this week? And who can you use me to reach out to and touch? Less about me, God, and more about you. God, if there's any pride in me, if there's anything, try me, test me, take it away. If there's anything that's insecure, God, show me this treasure that I have. And give me the boldness to carry it out and reach more and more people for your glory. If you're living for anything besides this, and I'm talking to you guys as a church, then our talents, our energy, our gifts are misplaced. I mean, we're a vessel for God. To be used, to carry this treasure that's in us to reach others, to mend and to cast. And if it were only about what happens on Sundays, if that's what we're all about, then we're missing it. We're missing it. You see that there's a lot of analogies about the church, but probably a great one is about, and kind of includes football, and I love football, so maybe that's why I like it. But it says that the church is like a huddle. Like no, it's kind of where you get on the same page. You kind of see in a football game, everybody kind of the guys get together and they kind of huddle together and they call the play. So they get all on the same page. They call the play and then they kind of break the huddle and they go and they execute the play. No one cares about the huddle at all. They only really pay attention to when the play is executed, play is run. And so, like us, the church is a huddle. We get on the same page. We're going to run such and such a play. And but we're just going to get on the same page. And what we've done here today is we've huddled. We've gotten on the same page. Now let's go. Let's run the play. Let's take what's in us to reach more and more people for the glory of God. Let's get beyond ourselves and be the church. And we can't forget that what we do is for the glory of God is beneficial to you. It's beneficial to you. You do whatever God would lead you to do to spread the gospel. Maybe you can invite people to church. Maybe it's just sharing your story and seeing how God uses that conversation. Sharing what God's doing in your life to one or two people. Sharing it with a friend. And you can use our website. Maybe you've been here before and you're like, man, I wish so-and-so would have heard that. Like all our messages are online, right? Just like copy the link or whatever and send it to a friend. Let them hear about it, you know? Offer to bring somebody to church. Offer to pick them up. Offer to take them to lunch. Threaten to share their deepest, darkest secrets on Facebook. Maybe not that one. But you know what I'm saying? If this sounds too pushy, then you can back off a little, but not too much. This is what we have. Like, invite people, bring people, share your story, and not everybody's going to be in that place. Maybe there people aren't in the place where they're ready to come to a church environment, but they're definitely in your life for a reason, and you need to share what God's doing in your life. Do whatever it takes. Do whatever it takes. We have these invite cards that we've kind of gotten out the last few weeks, and we just have them on a connection point table at the end of services, and it's just a great way to be able to hand a person a card after you have a conversation with them or whatever. Just be like, you know what, I want to invite you. This would be, it's done so much. God has done so much in my life. I want the same for you. Or go check us out. This is a church that kind of really, relates to where I am, and I'm like you. I really feel like it could relate to where you're at in life as well, and you use these, invite people. Have you ever been to like a, maybe this happens a lot on Facebook where somebody invites you to a party. Maybe it doesn't in person too. They invite you to like a party or an event, and you're like, yeah, I don't really want to go, but you kind of click that maybe button, because you don't want to be mean and say, no, I'm not going. And you kind of click that maybe button or whatever, and then you run into that person throwing the party, like before the party starts, right? And then you're at the store or whatever, and they're like, are you coming to the party? Are you coming? And you're like, oh, did I not get back to you? Yeah, I'm coming. And you kind of feel cornered into going to this thing, and you go, and you didn't really want to go, but you end up going anyway because you kind of felt like you pressured into going. And you go, and you're at the end, you're like, man, I'm kind of glad I went. I had fun tonight. I'm glad. Like, what if this in the same way? People who, they're not going to want to come here. Like, you just keep inviting people. You keep inviting people. When they come, how much more when God can speak into somebody's life and can transform somebody's life for the, and they're going to turn their life around for the better. And it's going to be great. And this great treasure that we carry, how much more impactful is it than, with this than just a party? People can come, and you may not think that people will like it, but maybe they come, and it's God speaking a word that directly hits them in their situation in life at that precise moment that you had no idea about. But they were like, man, I'm so glad I came. That's to your benefit. It's so awesome to see people just be, God to work in people's life and to know that you played a very small part in that happening. It's for your benefit. Either we believe this message or we don't. The psalmist says, I believed in God, so I spoke. Either we believe or we don't. We need to have the proper perspective. We're all just fragile clay. That's it. In and of ourselves, we're not all that special. We're not all that distinct from each other. You're great, believe me. But we're all clay. We're all just fragile clay. We break easy. We crack easy. We hurt easy. But we have this amazing privilege to carry this incredible treasure of God wherever we go. Let me pray for you.